Every time humanity rises, the planet resets. Fire, flood, darkness, ice. And each time, only a handful survive to start the world again. If that pattern is real, then we are not living at the beginning. We are living at the edge of the next reset. Architecture that should not exist. Imagine walking through history's earliest chapters and realizing the pages are out of order. Because the first structures humanity leaves behind do not look like beginners trying to understand stone. They look like masters returning to something they already knew. Across deserts, across mountains, across islands swallowed by time, monuments appear suddenly, fully formed, precise, deliberate. There is no rough draft, no apprenticeship, no moment where humanity learns to build. Only perfection dropped into the timeline, as if someone pressed continue on a story long interrupted. Massive stones carved with angles too clean for Stone Age tools. Blocks weighing as much as small houses, lifted and locked together with a precision modern engineers still struggle to explain. Walls where not even a single sheet of paper can slip between the joints. Then come the calendars, not simple marks on clay, but celestial instruments tuned to the movement of stars over thousands of years. Structures aligned to solstices, equinoxes, lunar standstills, and constellations that would not appear in those positions again for entire ages. These were not coincidences. They were calculations, measurements, knowledge preserved, knowledge inherited. But inherited from where? Because the official timeline tells us that these builders were fresh out of the Stone Age, yet their monuments whisper a different story. A story of people who had watched the sky for far longer than their civilization supposedly existed. A story of architects working not with trial and error, but with memory. This is the first crack in the timeline, the moment you step close enough to the accepted version of history and feel the floor shift beneath your feet. For if architecture appears fully formed, if mathematics appears fully mature, if astronomical knowledge appears fully developed, then humanity did not rise from darkness. It rose from a forgotten light. And the deeper you look, the more it begins to feel as though someone or something passed that light down, from an age the world no longer remembers. Objects buried in geological layers that should be empty if the architecture is the first crack in the timeline. Then what lies buried beneath the earth is the second and far more unsettling, because stone remembers longer than history. And sometimes, when the earth is opened, it gives back things that should not exist at all. Deep inside ancient coal seams, layers formed from forests that lived millions of years before humanity. Miners have pulled out metallic cubes with flat faces and perfect right angles. Coal does not shape metal. Pressure does not carve geometry. Yet the cubes were there, waiting. Then there are the machined surfaces found sealed in geological layers older than our species. Not chipped, not weathered. Machined as if cut by tools far more advanced than anything belonging to the people we are told existed at the time. And the deeper you go, the more impossible the discoveries become. Tools embedded inside stone that predates human civilization by tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of years. Hammerheads forged with purity no blacksmith from the 19th century could achieve, trapped inside Cretaceous limestone older than humanity itself. Spark plug-like components encased in volcanic ash from an age before humans were supposed to exist. These objects are not supposed to be there. Geology does not lie. Stone has no bias. If an artifact is buried beneath layers that took millions of years to form, then someone placed it there long before our current story begins. Mainstream explanations whisper the same words: contamination, misidentification, hoax. But the pattern repeats across continents, across eras, across conditions too diverse for coincidence. And each time one of these anomalies emerges, each time a tool or metal fragment is found where only nature should be, it is quietly removed, reclassified, or simply forgotten. Because these artifacts do more than break the rules, they threaten the rules themselves. They imply a world that existed before our first civilization, a world capable of working metal, shaping geometry, and crafting tools that survived the collapse of entire ages. If these artifacts are real, and the Earth insists that they are, then humanity's story did not start 12,000 years ago. It restarted. We are not the first. We are the survivors of survivors. walking on top of a timeline that holds memories we are only just beginning to uncover. Worlds swallowed by rising seas. If the out-of-place artifacts are whispers, then the drowned cities are echoes so vast the sea itself cannot fully silence them. Because beneath the calm surface of the oceans, in places where no civilization should have existed, lie the outlines of worlds that vanished long before memory. Sonar scans reveal perfect linear grids, where geology should produce chaos. Terraces carved with intention, staircases descending into the dark, rectangular plazas stretching wider than the streets of many modern cities, all lying in places that were dry land during the last glacial age. One of the most haunting lies near Japan, the Yonaguni Monument. At first glance, a collapsed sandstone cliff, but trace the angles with your hands and the truth begins to emerge. Nature does not carve parallel steps with identical risers. Nature does not create city-sized platforms aligned to the cardinal directions. Nature does not sculpt geometric blocks arranged as if for streets, drainage channels, and ceremonial plazas. This is architecture drowned by time. And Yonaguni is only the beginning. Off the coast of India lies Dwarka, a city dismissed as myth for centuries, until sonar revealed walls, columns, and foundations stretching across the seabed. Ancient Sanskrit texts spoke of a kingdom that vanished in a single night. Now the ruins echo the same story in stone. Far across the world, on the vast Sunda Shelf between Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, sonar scans reveal channels and foundations too straight, too parallel, too deliberate to be natural. This was a landmass once larger than many nations, a cradle for millions submerged when the Ice Age melted and the seas rose hundreds of feet. Even in the deep Caribbean, faint outlines of stone blocks lie arranged like city streets beneath the waters off Cuba. In the Bahamas, the Bimini Road continues to stir debate, its stones too uniform, too intentionally placed to be dismissed as mere erosion. And scattered along continental shelves around the world, fishermen pull up carved fragments, worked stone, and tools, lonely survivors of cities that now sleep beneath the waves. For years, these ruins were dismissed, denied, explained away. But the stories of the ancient world said something different. Those stories proved ancient. From Australia to the Pacific, from the Mediterranean to the Americas, cultures separated by oceans and language remember the same event. Land swallowed overnight, coasts erased, cities consumed by a rising ocean with a mind of its own. These were not metaphors. They were memories. Memories carried across thousands of years by the descendants of the survivors. Because if entire civilizations once lived along ancient coastlines, if they built cities during the stable calm of the last glacial age, then the rising seas did not just reshape the planet, they erased worlds. And what remains of those worlds is not myth, it is stone. It is geometry. It is foundation, plaza, and stair. It is the silent architecture of cultures wiped clean in a single global exhale. The drowned cities tell us something few dare to consider. Civilization did not begin when the waters receded. It began before they rose. Why? Every culture remembers the same disaster. If the cities beneath the oceans are the ruins, then the stories carried by humanity are the scars. Across every continent, every language family, every ancient tradition, there is a memory that refuses to die, a memory of a world that ended suddenly. In the highlands of Peru, elders speak of a darkness so complete people could not see their own hands. In the deserts of Australia, the oldest living oral traditions on Earth recall a rain of fire that fell from the sky. Sumerian tablets describe a great flood that erased entire kingdoms. Polynesian navigators tell of island chains that vanish beneath waves taller than mountains. Norse sagas speak of a winter so long the sun itself seemed to give up. And in the Americas, stories passed in quiet circles describe skies turning the color of iron and ash falling like snow upon the living. These cultures never met. They shared no ships, no letters, no teachers. Yet their memories align as if describing the same night, a night the world itself remembers. For centuries, scholars told us these were metaphors, symbolic stories, moral fables. But when the earth is opened, its truth mirrors the myth. Ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica show thin black layers of volcanic ash, matching the timelines of the ancient stories. Sediment layers reveal sudden floods and violent climate swings occurring not over ages but in moments. Tree rings show years where sunlight dimmed across the entire planet. No slow decline, no gentle transition, just an abrupt shift from stability to chaos. Exactly as the stories said. Survivors fleeing to the mountains, builders crafting boats in desperation, chosen groups carrying fragments of knowledge for the world that would come after. These are not the inventions of primitive minds. They are trauma memories passed from voice to voice across the generations. Memories stretched into myth to survive the fall. And the most unsettling part is how often these stories hint at what existed before the catastrophe. An age of brightness, of abundance, of knowledge, of cities that glowed without fire, of teachers who walked from the sea, of machines that hummed like living things. Every culture remembers losing something, something great, something irreplaceable, something the survivors could describe only as the world that came before. The myths do not mourn fantasy, they mourn memory, because the flood stories, the burning sky stories, the long winter stories, they are not warnings invented for children. They are eyewitness accounts from ancestors who watched an entire civilization end. And if 6 worlds fell before ours, then these stories are not just memories. They are messages. Messages written in the only form that could survive the extinction of an age. The genetic signatures that should not exist. If the stories are the whispers of the past, and the drowned cities are its bones, then the genome, your genome, is the message it carried forward. Because long before archaeology uncovered a single ruin, long before sonar traced forgotten coastlines, the greatest evidence of earlier civilizations was already inside us, carried quietly in our blood, wrapped in silence, waiting. Human DNA is an archive far older than any scripture, far more precise than any chronicle. It remembers every famine, every climate shift, every struggle to survive. But hidden within that vast library is something anomalous. A cluster of genetic traits found in less than half of 1% of the human population, too rare to be random, too consistent to be coincidence, and too unusual to belong to any known branch of human ancestry. This cluster appears in people who should have nothing in common. Isolated tribes in Southeast Asia, certain highland communities in India, indigenous Australians in the far north, the Basque people of Western Europe, and a scattering of coastal groups living near the sites of ancient submerged cities. They share no recent history, no migration route, no cultural connection. And yet the same genetic markers appear in all of them, like fragments of a long-forgotten chorus still humming beneath the skin. The traits themselves are extraordinary. Resistance to hypoxia, as if their ancestors survived in harsh, oxygen-poor environments. Endurance beyond normal limits, the kind required for long journeys across devastated landscapes. Enhanced spatial mapping, a heightened sense of direction, geometry, and environmental awareness. The neurological signature is the strangest. Patterns in the brain associated with deep memory encoding and environmental intuition, not personal memory, but something older, something inherited, as though the body remembers a world the mind has forgotten. Scientific explanations fall short. Altitude doesn't account for it. Climate doesn't account for it. Interbreeding with archaic humans doesn't account for it either. But there is one pattern that all these groups share. They descend from communities that survived ancient global catastrophes, communities that fled rising seas, communities that escaped falling ash, communities whose stories speak of lands that sank and skies that darkened for years. These traits were not random mutations, they were the genetic fingerprints of survivors. And the most unsettling discovery is not that these markers exist, but that they are activating again. Epigenetic studies show that environmental pressures today, rising temperatures, shifting magnetic fields, erratic climate rhythms, mirror the conditions that shape the original carriers. It is as though the genome feels the cycle returning, as though something ancient is waking up in the blood of those descended from the last world's remnant. This does not prove that earlier civilizations were advanced, but it proves something equally powerful. Humanity did not begin from nothing. We began from memory, from the fragments of 6 fallen worlds woven into our bones. from instincts older than our languages, from warnings encoded by ancestors who watched their own civilizations disappear. And now, as the Earth shifts once more, that inheritance is stirring. The oldest monuments are the most precise. If the DNA carries the memory and the myths carry the warning, then the stones carry the proof. Because scattered across the world stand monuments so precise, so impossibly engineered that they do not resemble the birth of civilization, they resemble its remains. For centuries, scholars told us these were triumphs of early societies, proof of humanity's slow climb from primitive beginnings. But the stones tell a different story, one carved in geometry and shadow. What makes these structures so impossible is not their size. Humanity has always been ambitious. It is the precision that defies belief. Blocks weighing dozens of tons, sometimes hundreds, cut so perfectly that even a razor's edge cannot slip between them. Angles aligned to celestial events with an accuracy modern instruments struggle to match. Cities laid out as though mirroring the movements of the stars. And the deeper we dig, the older and more advanced the foundations become. At Giza, beneath the limestone casing of the Great Pyramid, lies a core far older than the surface suggests. Its alignment to true north is so perfect that even modern engineers cannot explain how a Bronze Age culture achieved such accuracy. The pyramid does not feel like a beginning, it feels like an echo. In Peru, the walls of Sacsayhuaman interlock like a cosmic puzzle. Each stone is unique, shaped to fit the next with a precision that defies modern replication. The Incas themselves admitted, "We did not build the foundation. We inherited it." At Teotihuacan, the layout of the city mirrors the orbital spacing of the planets. The Avenue of the Dead aligns not with a solstice, but with the star that held significance in a distant epoch. The builders knew the sky, not as observers, but as archivists. Across China, entire pyramid fields lie hidden beneath forested hills, many oriented towards celestial events no longer visible due to Earth's long, slow wobble. The older the structure, the more perfect the geometry. And perhaps the greatest mystery of all, the global uniformity. Separate cultures, separate continents, separate eras, yet the oldest layers share the same characteristics. Cyclopean stone blocks, interlocking joints, astronomical precision, resonant materials, foundations older than the civilizations above them. It is not evolution, it is inheritance. As if every culture that rose after a great collapse found fragments of something older and tried to rebuild what they could barely remember. The strangest pattern is this: the further back you go in time, the more advanced the engineering becomes. Technology does not regress without catastrophe. Knowledge does not fade without a fall. So the stones stand as silent survivors of civilizations wiped clean, foundations too heavy for flood, fire, or ice to erase. The official story insists the timeline is linear, but the world's greatest monuments stand like beacons, pointing backward into a darkness full of light. They tell us, we were here before. They tell us, you are not the first. And if the stones are right, then the question becomes inescapable. If someone built these structures in ages long forgotten, what force buried their world so deeply beneath time that only the strongest architecture survived, reconstructing the worlds that existed before ours? If the megaliths are the fingerprints and the myths are the memories, then the outline of the civilizations themselves begins to emerge from the shadows of prehistory. Not as fantasy, not as speculation, but as fragments, pieces of worlds, erased so completely that only their faintest echoes remain. Yet when those echoes are placed together, a pattern takes shape. A pattern of not one lost civilization but six. 6 worlds. 6 rises. 6 falls. And we modern humanity are the 7th. 1. The civilization of the Sunda Shelf. Long before Southeast Asia became a scattering of islands, the region was a vast landmass larger than many modern nations. Rivers braided across fertile plains, coastlines stretched for thousands of miles. Millions could have lived there. But when the Ice Age ended and the oceans rose, the entire world they built vanished beneath the sea. What remains is not myth but submerged geometry, straight channels, rectangular foundations, and shorelines shaped by human hands. This was a world swallowed whole. 2. The Green Sahara Civilization. Before it became desert, the Sahara was a lush, water-rich expanse, lakes, rivers, megafauna, and people far more organized than the textbooks admit. Beneath the sand, radar scans revealed geometric structures, buried settlements, and the faint ghost of a society erased by a sudden, catastrophic shift from green to gold. A civilization undone not by war, but by the sky. 3. The Beringian Cold Age civilization between Siberia and Alaska once stretched a vast, temperate grassland known as Beringia. Not a migration route, a homeland. Populations thrived there for thousands of years, developing adaptations for cold, scarcity, and the shifting cycles of the ice. When the glaciers melted and the seas swallowed their world, the people scattered, their memory fading into hints in the genomes of northern populations. A civilization wiped out by rising water and returning cold. 4. The pre-Harappan Indus culture before Mohenjo-daro, before Harappa. Older layers lie buried layers of a society already versed in urban planning, already mastering grids, geometry, drainage, and standardized construction. This was not a beginning. This was a continuation, an inheritance from a world far older than its ruins, a civilization that rose, flourished, and then disappeared during violent climate shifts and rising rivers. 5. The Mediterranean maritime civilization across Crete, Cyprus, Sardinia, Malta, scattered across island chains long considered disconnected ruins, appear that share the same architectural DNA, massive harbor installations, precision stonework, marine engineering ahead of its time, a maritime culture that may have sailed farther than any recorded people of their era. Their collapse aligns with abrupt volcanic events, tsunamis, and shifting seas, a civilization erased by water and fire. 6. The Amazon Basin civilization. For centuries, the Amazon was assumed to be an untouched wilderness, but beneath the canopy, LIDAR reveals roads, plazas, canals, geometric earthworks stretching for hundreds of miles. This was not the work of scattered tribes. It was the fingerprint of a coordinated society, capable of reshaping landscapes and managing ecosystems on a grand scale. Their disappearance remains one of the world's quietest mysteries, tied perhaps to drought, disease, or a collapse that left the forest to reclaim everything. These 6 civilizations do not fade gently from the record. They vanish abruptly as though the planet itself turned the page in a single night. Floods, volcanic winters, sudden freezes, mega-droughts, cosmic impacts, different triggers, same outcome. A world rises, a world falls. A silence follows, and then another world rises from the survivors who carry nothing but fragments of the one before. Humanity did not climb a single ladder of progress, it climbed 7. And 6 of those ladders were shattered by forces older than history. We are the 7th. We are the aftermath. We are the latest chapter in a book written and erased again and again. And if all 6 worlds ended in sudden collapse, the question becomes impossible to avoid. What erased them? And why does the same pattern appear to be returning now? Why the oldest evidence disappears first? If the 6 forgotten civilizations are the outlines in the sand, then what happens next is the wave that erases them. Because for every ruin that surfaces, for every artifact pulled from stone, for every anomaly that refuses to fit into the official story, there is an equal force pushing it back into silence. Researchers call it the disappearing trail. It begins quietly. A diver maps an underwater platform with angles too precise to be natural. Before the images can be published, the data is seized, the site restricted, the explanation rewritten. A university team excavates a structure older than any known city. Within weeks, funding is cut. Access is revoked. The discovery is reframed as misinterpreted. Nor is the information irreplaceable. A museum receives an artifact with machining too advanced for its age. It is placed in a drawer with no catalog number, no label, no record. Even satellite images of certain regions vanish behind digital walls without explanation, as though someone knew exactly what the cameras would find before the public ever saw it. These are not accidents. They form a pattern. The older the structure, the more precise the geometry, the more advanced the implied technology, the faster it disappears. Why? There are several possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. 1. Institutional inertia. Entire academic fields are built on the belief that civilization is recent. A discovery that rewrites the timeline doesn't just challenge theory. It threatens careers, textbooks, funding, reputations. It is easier to bury cracks than rebuild the foundation. 2. National interest. Underwater ruins often lie near strategic coastlines. Ancient structures built along fault lines carry implications for energy, military activity, and mineral resources. What challenges history may also challenge power. 3. The most unsettling possibility, that the suppression is not protecting nations but civilization itself. Because if the public understood that 6 civilizations rose before ours, each reaching heights equal to or greater than what we have now, and each collapsing in sudden global catastrophe, everything changes. The economy, social order, psychology, religion, technology. Geopolitics. A world built on the illusion of stability cannot afford to admit that stability has never existed. If earlier civilizations fell to forces that return in cycles, then we, the 7th, are not standing at the peak. We are standing at the edge. And perhaps there are groups, networks, institutions, quiet orders, who believe that revealing this truth would trigger panic before humanity is ready. If so, the suppression does not begin now. It is ancient, a tradition passed down through survivors of the last collapse. A protocol, a warning, a silence meant to protect us from the weight of the knowledge that once destroyed entire worlds. But silence does not last forever. The evidence rises from the oceans. It appears in stone, it whispers in our DNA, it lives in the myths that refuse to die. And the closer we come to recognizing the pattern, the more urgent the question becomes. If all these discoveries disappear before they can be understood, then what is it that someone does not want us to see? And more importantly, what are they preparing for? Because every suppressed discovery points toward one final truth. The cycle is real, and it is returning. The signs that the cycle is returning. If the suppression is the shadow, then what follows now is the shape casting it. Because every ruin, every myth, every anomaly buried in stone and DNA points toward a single truth. We are not living at the beginning, we are living at the threshold. The 8th civilization is not thousands of years away. It is forming now, quietly, inevitably, in the cracks of our present age. Earth does not shift without warning. The planet always speaks first in a language older than humanity. It speaks through magnetic drift, ocean rise, abrupt climate oscillations, record-breaking storms, and frozen foundations melting for the first time in human memory. These are not random events. They mirror the same signals that preceded every prior collapse in the geological record. Not over centuries, over decades. Our decades. Carbon levels now exceed anything seen across the entire span of known human existence. Ice sheets shatter in real time. Rivers shift course. Wildlife migrates in patterns that defy all recorded history. The atmosphere, the oceans, the magnetic field, all of them wobble, as though adjusting to a rhythm returning after thousands of years of silence. This would already be enough to unsettle any civilization. But something else is happening. Something within us, the rare genetic cluster carried by the descendants of ancient survivors, the ones whose ancestors lived through the last great turning, is activating again. Epigenetic switches linked to endurance, adaptation, and instinctive environmental mapping are lighting up in younger generations with no clear explanation. It is as if the body remembers what the conscious mind has forgotten, a world tilting toward another reset. At the same time, humanity is undergoing its own form of acceleration. We rediscover solar power as ancient myths speak of cities that shone without fire. We create artificial intelligence as legends recall machines that moved on their own. We experiment with bioengineering as forgotten cultures once shaped landscapes into living systems. This is not coincidence. This is convergence. Civilizations accelerate near the end of each cycle as though driven by a subconscious urgency, a need to reach some unknown threshold before the turning arrives. The question is not whether the 8th civilization will rise. It already is. The real question is whether it will survive, because 6 times before humanity reached a height of brilliance, a height perhaps greater than our own, And 6 times, the world reset the story and forced us to begin again. But we hold an advantage none of those worlds possessed. We can see the pattern. We can read the earth. We can study the ruins. We can listen to the myths not as fantasy, but as warning. We possess the knowledge to break the cycle instead of repeating it. The 8th civilization could be the first to outlive the turning, the first to protect its memory, the first to carry its knowledge through the storm instead of losing it. But that depends on whether we are willing to confront the truth, that stability is an illusion, that the world moves in cycles, that we are standing on the ruins of 6 forgotten ages, and that the next great shift is no longer in the distant future. It is unfolding, now, in real time, around us. If we recognize the pattern and prepare with wisdom, the 8th civilization could rise into an age unlike any before. If we ignore it, we will join the others as another silent chapter buried beneath the earth. In the end, this is not a story about ruins. It is not a story about floods or fallen cities or civilizations swallowed by time. It is a story about memory, the memory the earth carries, the memory our ancestors preserved, the memory hidden in our bones. We are the children of 6 forgotten worlds. We are the inheritors of knowledge buried and reborn again and again, through fire, through water, through darkness. And now, standing at the threshold of the 8th civilization, we must decide whether we will repeat their cycle or transcend it. Because every stone, every myth, every anomaly whispered by the earth is not pointing backward. It is pointing forward. It is telling us that the turning returns, that the old rhythm is rising, that the world remembers what we have forgotten. But here's the truth they could not erase. We are not powerless. We are not blind. We are not condemned to repeat the same ending. We are the first generation with the sight to see the pattern, with the tools to prepare for it, with the knowledge to carry our civilization beyond the reset. And maybe, just maybe, that is why you are here, hearing these words, feeling that quiet pull in your chest. Not fear, recognition. Because something in you remembers. Something older than your name, older than your culture, older than this world of glass and electricity. Something passed down by the last survivors of the last age. A whisper carried across bloodlines. Do not forget. Do not fall asleep. When the cycle returns, be ready. So if this video resonated with you, if it stirred something deep, if it awakened a memory that has no language, then you are not alone. You are part of the 7th civilization, awakening to the truth that created the first 6. You are the bridge between what was and what can be. If you carry this message forward, if you share it, reflect on it, speak of it, spread it, you become part of the lineage that refuses to let history begin again with empty hands. And when you're ready to go deeper into the forgotten worlds, into the suppressed evidence, into the ancient technologies and the warnings left for us, subscribe, stay close, and follow the next chapter. Because this isn't the end of the story. It's the moment you realize the story was always inside you. Welcome to the Remember.